We are all clearly understanding that this is really a one horse race between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the San Francisco 49ers to figure out who is going to keep Brandon Aiyuk. Is it going to be the Steelers or will the 49ers get a contract done? That's what we're waiting for. But one of the things that has been interesting about this situation, as we've seen the compensation leaked for multiple trades, including the Browns accepting a deal that would have gotten them Amari Cooper a second, and I believe it was a fifth in return for Brandon Aiyuk. We've heard reports about the Pats offering nothing concrete, though. But now we have heard what the San Francisco 49ers are asking in return for a trade for Brandon Aiyuk. And based on what they're asking, it kind of makes sense, probably why the Pittsburgh Steelers or the 49ers haven't been able to see eye to eye on a trade compensation. Remember, Brandon Aiyuk has accepted the contract terms from the Steelers, meaning if he were to get traded, he would sign the contract extension through the Steelers. That was the hangup with the trade to the Browns and the Pats earlier, amongst other teams. So the part that was difficult for the other deals has actually been figured out with the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's the compensation that the 49ers were going to get in return that has been the biggest struggle. And this is reportedly what we are hearing. So, according to Blitzberg, they have over 100,000 followers on Twitter. They seem very plugged in to the situation involving the Steelers, obviously. But this is what they're saying: 49ers have asked the Steelers if they're willing to trade either Minka Fitzpatrick, Pat Fryermuth, or George Pickens along with a second or third rounder in exchange for 49ers Brandon Aiyuk. And like I mentioned, this has been the hangup with this going through is not the contract stuff, the compensation that the 49ers would get has been the problem, and they haven't seen eye to eye in regards to that situation. And listen, those are all three really quality players that you could envision helping the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, Minka Fitzpatrick, he's arguably the best safety in the NFL right now, and he's been pretty darn phenomenal since entering the league. And obviously, what role would he fit? He would either pair up with either Jair or Talanoa Hufanga. Regardless, he would be the primary safety as it currently stands right now. You look at Pat Fryermuth. Pat Fryermuth is extremely productive tight end in his first couple years, just dealing with some injuries as of late. But he is a very complete quality tight end who would absolutely potentially be the heir apparent to George Kittle when it's all said and done, and clearly be a very impactful tight end too, right off the rip. And then, of course, you see right there George Pickens. Now, we've talked about George Pickens as a potential get from the San Francisco 49ers in return. I have been hesitant about how that would look on paper. George Pickens and a second or a third for Brandon Aiyuk makes sense from a compensation standpoint because you're getting a young player still on his rookie deal with tons of talent and upside. However, George Pickens has proven early on to be a bit of a problem in regards to, I would say, buy-in of playing the wide receiver position, at least how we envision Kyle Shanahan would want that to be played. He went viral last year for not blocking on the goal line and simply stating that, hey, he wasn't trying to get hurt. He wasn't trying to get rolled up. And as a result of not blocking, it meant that the Pittsburgh Steelers didn't score. I believe it was Jalen Warren who got stuffed on the goal line. So I've been making jokes about it, and I've been saying that George Pickens is already in Kyle Shanahan's doghouse, and he hasn't even been traded there yet. I think that, yes, on paper, if this is Madden or this is fantasy, that would be a quality trade. But going from Brandon Aiyuk to George Pickens, although both supremely talented, both play the wide receiver position, And you would imagine the talent that George Pickens would bring over would rival what Brandon Ayuk provides, but the difference all comes in the mentality of the players. They are all the Pickens and Brandon Ayuk are just fundamentally different players at this current stages of their career. Brandon Ayuk had to go through a bit of a learning process, right? We've talked about the doghouse before and what that all meant. But Brandon Ayuk came out the other side an all pro. He came out one of the best, if not the best, blocking wide receivers in the league. Not only that, he's a phenomenal route runner. He can do it in a multitude of different ways. And he's proven to be a phenomenal team player in some of the biggest moments in the playoffs. You look at some of the runs that have been sprung for big time touchdowns. It's came off the hip of Brandon Ayuk blocking downfield for multiple seconds. So that's just an area where you see a massive drop off. And you can already envision George Pickens and Kyle Shanahan basically bumping heads over the simple fact of what is required to be a wide receiver in Kyle's scheme. So, overall, I would say that there's nothing crazy from a 49ers ask perspective. The 49ers aren't giving Brandon Ayuk up for free, and it would be an absolute mistake to do that. You have to get something in return of value if you are going to be moving on a second team all pro wide receiver in the prime of his career at 26 years old. So getting a Minka Fitzpatrick, Pat Fryermuth, a George Pickens, those are all names that I think align with the value of Brandon Ayuk. But obviously, if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you would absolutely have hesitation in moving that type of compensation in order to go get Brandon Ayuk. Obviously, if you're trading George Pickens, a Brandon Ayuk, and a second round pick, you might be getting a more polished wide receiver mentally and from a on-field standpoint, but you're also having to give up future draft pick compensation. That's tough. One of your leaders in Minka Fitzpatrick, that's tough. And then of course Pat Fryermuth, where you could actually, I would actually think that the Steelers would be open to trading Pat Fryermuth in a second. I feel like they would actually still win that trade because Brandon Ayuk is just a much better player than Pat Fryermuth at this time. So that would be considered a win, in my opinion. I wouldn't necessarily love that trade if I'm the 49ers, but from a Steelers vantage point, it makes sense, I guess. But they seem to be reluctant to allegedly accept any of these offers. So this is floating out there. Um, so we don't know if this is ultra factual or not, but it is the first time that we've had an opportunity to really look at what potentially could be being discussed in a trade for Brandon Ayuk and what is ultimately hanging up the deal. So this is an ongoing situation. Every day that this goes on, there will be updates and things of that nature. So we will continue to cover it and bring it to you as best we can. But this is again reportedly rumored to be what has been the holdup with a trade of Brandon Ayuk to the Steelers and all that good stuff. So let me know. Would you accept any of these? What do you think of these particular trade packages? Let me know what you're thinking in the comments below. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more updates.